Hello and welcome to another episode of the PowerDrift Podcast. Now, 2019 as a year was really great for us. We did a lot of reviews, we attended a lot of launches, drove a lot of cars, rode a lot of motorcycles, attended a lot of motorsport events. I'm sure you've seen a lot of our expo coverage as well. And to end it off, I think we added a lot of hosts, people who you see in front of the camera. And not just that, we added a lot of other people to the team as well. Of course, you've seen Shubhaprata Marmar, who has been a constant companion in these podcasts, and also he likes to be in front of the camera. We've also added Ronak Ajinkya, who is always in front of the camera with his nice shiny head. But there's one member who is joining me today in the PowerDrift Podcast, and that is Mr. Abhik Das. It's been a while. How are you doing, buddy?
I am doing very good, and thank you so much for having me. But hang on a second. I think I have a case of influenza here. What about your swagger glasses that you've just forgotten?
Yeah, man. I mean, people who have been following the podcast, they have seen me in my podcast sunglasses, glasses, whatever you want to call that. But yeah, not happening today. Abhik, today we're going to talk about your journey, how it's been for you. And of course, I mean, for someone who has gotten into automotive, the affection towards cars and motorcycles starts at a very young age. So tell us your story, man. How did it all begin, and what got you into this stream of being close to vehicles?
So just like you said, it starts at a very young age, and for me it was as per the story that goes, that what my mom told me is that I started saying Gaga looking at cars first, and then I probably said mom and dad and mama and papa or whatever.
I was thinking you must have said like sutu tu 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 tu.
Not so soon.
Yeah.
You gotta start slow, right?
Yeah.
So this was back in Shillong at the time, and there were just like ambassadors and Fiats around, and I was fascinated with cars, and every year that progressed on, I only wanted cars as gifts for my birthday. So Hot Wheels, like a lot of Hot Wheels, G.I. Joe, and that's all I knew. And then a tricycle came along, and that tricycle was my best friend, honestly, because I never really took any interest in other sports, like football and cricket. They would very quickly get boring for me.
Yeah.
It's not like I didn't try playing them. I definitely did, but they were pretty boring actually.
Yeah.
And then I think
was automotive like a part of your family? I mean, was your dad like interested in auto as well?
Surprisingly not. I think my father has only driven a gypsy ever, like once.
Like ever?
Ever.
All right.
And this was while he was in the BSF, and there was nobody else really who was interested in cars or motorcycles as such, and till much later, in fact, they didn't even think you could like make a career out of it, unless you were an engineer or somebody. But I mean, that's how things progressed as I grew up. That's all I knew, like cars and motorcycles, and then I remember being in, I think, 4th grade or 6th grade, and my first glimpse of Formula One. In fact, I am forgetting motorcycles, which I'm gonna refer to and come back to a little later, but my first glimpse of Formula One was Schumacher almost pushing out Mika Hakkinen. I can't remember the track, in fact, but that sight was so engaging for me at that time, and I was hooked, and I was like, this is something I've got to watch. What is this? And that's when I discovered Formula One. Motorcycles came much earlier. Even though I was into cars, I had this sort of wall clock at home, which my parents received as a gift on their marriage, and it was a number 10 Suzuki, one of the 500s, which I obviously got to know much later. But
I mean, it had a picture inside the clock.
And it was embossed. It was like a good-looking thing, very small clock. So you couldn't miss the motorcycle. And this guy who was riding it was sporting a mustache, a clear visor, and I would time and again think that this is my dad, and my father would play around saying that it is me. And it's only later that I discovered it was Kenny Roberts Sr. On the number 10 Suzuki. So I mean, I had that for a long time. Those memories are there. And then
do you remember sitting on a motorcycle for the very first time, or maybe sitting in a car for the very first time? Do you remember that feeling, or do you remember that scene?
First time in a car was again an ambassador in Shillong. I was fascinated by the ashtray it had, of all things, because it was it was mounted on the dashboard.
Right.
I mean, and I think it had a vent or some some vent of sort, like you would drop stuff in it,
Okay.
close it, open it, and there would be nothing in it. It would clean itself. And I was like, wow.
Okay.
Cars weren't really, I mean, back in Shillong and this is late 80s.
Right.
So not many cars around.
Yeah.
A lot of motorcycles around, a lot of like good sounding motorcycles around.
Right.
So Shillong had a lot of RD350s.
Right. Yeah, I think back then it was the era of
Yamahas.
two strokes and Yamahas.
RX100s, and they were all over the place, littered over the place. Yeah. My cousins were in Guwahati at the time, and I remember going to Guwahati and then discovering that my uncle had a Yezdi.
Right.
And the moment he showed me that the gear lever would just click
The
back
flip,
into
into a kick.
into a kick, I was like, whoa, I've got to start. So that was the first motorcycle I ever started. Again, this
And
was
how old were you?
4 or 5.
Wow.
Sorry, I mean 4th, 5th grade.
Okay.
4 or 5.
Like 4 or 5, how is he riding?
Yeah, my weight probably wouldn't. It'll probably just like throw me out.
So that was your first time when you actually sat on a motorcycle.
Yeah,
Do you remember that feeling, dude?
I sat on it, didn't ride it.
Right.
So that feeling kind of stuck around. Like I just had to discover what it felt to ride, and nobody really like took me around at that time. I think my first ride on a motorized two-wheeler was a moped.
Okay. Oh.
And even that was thrilling for me.
Right,
So, and after that, I think it was only until later in school that I started to ride with friends, sneaking out, and you know how it is.
I mean, you know, that feeling of sitting on, at least for motorcycles for me, I mean, sitting on a motorcycle for the first time is so vivid because that feeling of the air blowing in your face, and you're small, right? So 99% of the time you're sitting on a tank with someone riding, your father or your mama or your chacha or whoever, and that feeling is incredible.
Yeah,
man.
yeah, absolutely.
And how did things progress after that? I mean, what really got you into this space of automotive journalism? Because I'm telling you, a lot of these people have a misconception, not a misconception, but this thought that people who are reviewing cars or motorcycles in the industry come from an engineering background, but not a lot of them are from that background.
That's true.
Like, including me. I mean, I've done journalism, but automotive was more of an enthusiastic thing for me.
Yeah.
And the two things combined just kind of clicked.
Yeah.
So what's the story for you?
So again, the same thing. I have absolutely no background in automotive engineering or journalism that way.
Right.
I was kind of an average student in school, and then post college, I would just read all the magazines, Autocar, Overdrive at the time, and all of these people that I am fortunate enough and lucky enough to work with now.
Right.
I was a huge fan at the time, and I never really thought I could be, part of this fraternity and community at some point, because I thought, it just looks like an elusive career that way.
Right.
Getting hold of, brilliant motorcycles and cars and reviewing them.
Right.
Looks like a fun life also.
Yeah.
It's not, by the way.
Yeah. It's
Okay, a little bit of fun, of course. But how it started for me was I kept reading, and then I started off with a different career altogether.
What are you doing?
Started off with call centers and then got into travel as an industry, so ticketing, reservations, stuff like that. And it was, I think, at a time when I was working
So
with...
you were a commerce student?
Yeah, I was a commerce student.
Okay.
And so absolutely no relation to this, but every time somebody would ask me about a car or motorcycle, I would have tons to write.
Yeah.
So I would write like long texts, and so people started telling me, "Dude, you should do something about it." It'll be, I mean, if you can explain stuff well enough, I think you can probably, take a shot at like writing in a magazine. And even then, it never occurred to me, like, how would I go about, without a background in journalism or engineering, who's going to take me in? And there was this one time when I had already worked for about 7-8 years in other industries, and I owned Enfields at the time. And this was after,
So was that your, go-to motorcycle in terms of going to college and stuff like that? What were you riding back then or driving back then?
Okay, let's start with college then. College, my friend and I, we went to Karol Bagh, pretty famous in Delhi.
Yeah.
And Karol Bagh has a lot of random shops, but a lot of nice shops as well. There's one shop particularly, they specialize in RD350s.
Okay.
And we had gone to that shop. And
I think Karol Bagh also as a space specializes in a particular motorcycle. Like, for example, when you say RD350s, I've heard stories of...
There are lanes and lanes of
like Royal Enfield
BSAs,
specialists.
old parts,
that is true,
scooter
right?
parts. Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge market, and it's a maze. You really have to know like who to go to, what to buy.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, you can.
And it's still very significant in
Pretty
Delhi.
much. As far as accessories and
You still
second-hand used motorcycles are concerned, it's a huge market to go to. So we went to this RD350 shop and saw a few models, and we were getting motorcycles from 7K to 12K, and then there was a really nice one
And
for
12K,
17.
you mean 12,000?
12,000.
Right.
And 17,000, there was the best one they had was for 17,000.
Wow.
And
this was
I was
when?
like, this was
early 2000?
This is 2002, 2003. Yeah,
Right.
early 2000s when the whole thing about RDs being like precious and rare was not too evident. I mean, 2-strokes had just died, 4-strokes had just come in.
The CBZ, the Charisma.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I went back home and I told my dad. So my dad isn't really interested in automobiles, but he has a sharp mind, and thankfully he gave me the right advice. So I told him like, look, I want to buy an RD.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, it's a very old bike, and your commute one way to college is 40 kilometers. So you will be commuting 80 kilometers on that motorcycle
Every day.
Yeah. So you really think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay. Next time I went, and I really wanted to buy it at that time. So there was this guy who came down from, I think, somewhere in Punjab, Patiala or somewhere.
Right.
He had come down in Delhi for something else. There was one little part which was broken, and he was sitting with the entire engine open in front
Of the
him.
RD?
Of the RD.
Yeah.
At
It was
that
LT,
time.
HT.
I think an LT.
Right.
Don't quite remember
Right.
at that time. But I mean, the whole engine
Was open.
Yeah, and I told him like, what's the deal? I mean, why are you sitting like this?
Yeah.
He's like, something went wrong, and like
Trying to
this is what
figure it out,
happened
yeah.
eventually. I was like, whoa. So he's like, I mean, when you buy an RD, I mean, it'll thrill you for maybe 100 meters or like 100 kilometers, but you can't really say
Right.
how much it'll run.
Right.
So I was like, okay, maybe this is not the right thing for me.
Right.
Went back, finally sat in for a CBZ because another friend of mine had one.
Right.
And I would credit the CBZ as my first motorcycle that I truly rode like properly. It was splendors and everything before. I couldn't even like release the clutch properly. So
Wow.
unintentional wheelies like a lot of
Instant whoop.
yeah. Thankfully, like I've never taken a fall
Yeah.
like that, but those splendors and CD100s,
notorious,
the
dude.
first gear is
Yeah,
like
notorious.
you could
Yeah.
wheelie them like really easily. So the CBZ happened, and CBZ was I got a choice between the Pulsar 180 and the CBZ at the time,
Right.
and the CBZ because of its rear set foot pegs,
Right.
the single gear lever. Those were really like tiny things which were really appealing
Made
to
it
me.
sporty, appealing.
Yeah, and then there was that Honda smoothness which you couldn't get in a Pulsar. So there was this Pulsar tribe and the CBZ
Yeah,
tribe.
yep.
And I've ridden Pulsars enough, but that front heavy feel was
Yeah.
just not me. Like I couldn't like make sort of friends with
Yeah.
that kind of style. And then so CBZ happened, and soon after Charisma was launched, and then a
Yeah.
lot of you had a Charisma. Right?
Yeah,
You just
I-
posted a picture. the
Yeah,
other
I
day.
did. Yep.
So beautiful motorcycle,
Yeah.
man. That motorcycle was. I've had more memories, I think, on the Charisma
Then the
than on
CBZ.
because
But you own the CBZ.
yeah, I own the CBZ.
And then you sold it off and got the Charisma.
No. So a couple of my friends had Charisma. So and this was college, and we were staying separately. So we were all like exchanging motorcycles all
Oh,
the time.
wow.
So lot of experiences on the Charisma. And then I think there was a little lull where sort of work life settled in.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, time to move on a little further. And the thing was like, we weren't really exposed to 4-cylinder or multi-cylinder motorcycles, especially in Delhi. There was this niche crowd, which I think was started by Dr. Thareja, if I'm not wrong.
Arun Tareja.
Gods, they
Gods,
were called,
yeah.
Group of Delhi Superbikes.
Right.
And they would be something we would always like envy and awe, because I remember pulling up at a red light, and there were 3 of them all lined up, and I could just like ogle at them for ages, but we really didn't have any exposure to these motorcycles. And then so I thought, and I've always been a little technically inclined, and you know how stuff works and stuff. It's something that really interests me. So I was like, okay, cars maybe. And then my first car happened. That was a Ford Icon 1.6 row cam. I bought it used. And I just fell in love with it the first time I drove
Isn't
it.
the 1.6 was the notorious of the lot,
absolutely.
of
I
the
mean,
Icon lot.
The amount of money I spent on that car is insane. Not even like modifying it as such, just maintaining it.
Wow.
But what was
Do you still have it?
rewarding?
No.
No. I can't afford that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, because it's like a lifetime project.
Right.
If you own that car,
Right.
even now. But the handling of it was so nice. I honestly can't remember a car that I've driven in so long that had a steering that direct.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Did it have a
Great
power
mid-range.
steering back then? No.
Yeah.
It had a power steering.
Power steering, yeah. Hydraulic, not electrically assisted,
okay.
but and the mid-range was so punchy.
Yeah.
So there were these cars that I really wanted to own. So Icon was one of them.
Right.
Honda, the City was one of them.
Right.
From back then.
Right.
And then
The first
gen.
City that came out, yeah.
So I had the Type 2 of the Gen 1.
Okay.
The one with the clear lens headlamps and all.
Right.
And the Baleno, which I didn't own because I shifted back to motorcycles after
Right.
that.
Oh, okay.
So motorcycles again. So single cylinders is not much to you know how it functions.
Right.
I mean, if you sit at a mechanic's place for long enough, I mean, you'd figure out stuff.
Yep.
Cars were.
I mean, they are the least complicated of the lot.
Absolutely.
Because of the single cylinder.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
much
things
more
get
affordable. Much more
affordable, easy to maintain, stuff like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
things start to get a lot more complicated as you start adding cylinders.
Yeah,
There are a lot more
absolutely.
mechanical parts, moving parts.
That's correct.
There's just a lot of thought and service that goes into, just opening and understanding how bigger engines function.
Right. So even like modification would be a big deal because now you're
Absolutely.
spending on like 4 cylinders instead of one.
not
So
one.
So that was the thing. So cars happened. The City happened. What was funny was the Icon was not reliable at
Right.
the time. Okay, so I had spent a lot of time in the garage getting it fixed and everything. Sold it off. Bought the City.
Right.
And the City, like any other Japanese car at the time, was like super reliable. Okay,
Right.
so I went back to my mechanic after like I think about 4 months of driving it, and I told him like nothing is going wrong with this
Right,
car. Like,
right.
do you want to check it once because things go wrong with cars?
yeah.
And he's like, no, I was telling you, just buy a Japanese
Yeah.
car. You'll be as a second-hand product. I think
It's an easy investment.
yeah, absolutely. It's a better investment.
Right,
Let's say
right,
that.
right.
The Icon was a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Honestly, a lot
Yeah,
more fun.
yeah.
First thing I changed on the City was the suspension because it was so soft.
Yeah.
It was like.
So you actually changed it.
Yeah, but a really cheap. This thing just
Hack of sorts, or it was
hack,
like, yeah,
proper
alright,
hack. Just changed the suspension fluid to something much stiffer, much thicker in fact.
Right. So you changed the fluid.
For the damper, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
not the springs
I
and all,
think-
because if you go for a full-on coilover setup, it's quite expensive.
Yeah. So you just put in a viscous.
Yeah, like a
Oil of
thicker
sort, yeah.
fluid into the dampers,
Right.
and that kind of sorted things out for me.
Right.
I was happy with the car at the time. This car was previously owned by Dhruv Bhel from AutoX.
Oh, it's the same car that you get.
Yeah,
The UP registered.
Oh no,
But
that's a
different
friend's.
one.
Yeah, that's a friend's.
Okay.
This one was a Delhi registered. I had my eyes on this car for about 3 years because I was working in an office just behind
Right.
AutoX's office at the time,
Right.
and I didn't know that this
Yeah.
was owned by Dhruv Bhel at the time.
Oh.
So it had a custom paint job on it, a light blue custom paint job.
Yeah.
Had alloys. Wasn't the VTEC. It was the 1.5,
Yeah.
but a non-VTEC.
Yeah.
Then I peeped inside the car once, and I saw like Recaro replica seats and a Recaro steering, and I was like, "That's it."
To be honest, dude, I mean, in today's time, when you look at such things, I mean, you will find it pretty common, right? I mean, you will find like an aftermarket steering wheel or a nicely
I think,
modded
yeah, now
paint
it
and
is.
stuff like
Now
that.
it
But
is.
back then,
It
when you
was
spot
a
one of
rare
these, it was
sight, a rare sight.
like somebody's actually taking the effort to
Yeah.
go to a paint shop,
To
go
customize it
Yeah,
like
to
that, yeah.
customize it. I mean, not just
And
aesthetically,
something
but
was just
mechanically
tastefully
as well.
done, not like like just
Yeah, I mean, just a
slap
random
it on chrome parts
correct.
or something.
Yeah.
So,
So I mean, back then when you used to spot one of these, even if it was a motorcycle, I mean, I used to get super fascinated because it used to be this thought of someone taking the time out, taking the money out, and spending it on a pet project of sorts. So yeah, man, it's always great.
yeah. And well, that City didn't have a nice ending to it.
Right.
So I'm going to skip that entirely and then move on to motorcycles because I somehow just like got a little intrigued about this whole RE lifestyle,
Yeah.
like even now I think Royal Enfield sells you a lifestyle more than a motorcycle.
Yeah,
or
both
just a
Harley
motorcycle.
Davidson and Royal Enfield. I think
Exactly,
they're not
yeah.
selling motorcycles,
So
they're
the
selling an
whole-
experience, that lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. So that whole thing about like riding in groups and all, that was a very attractive proposition for me. So
Yeah.
I picked up, I think this was a 2004 TCI Electra at that time.
Right.
My friend had a 2003 CDI Electra, which I really wanted
Right.
because it was a little more old school in the way it sounded and stuff like that.
Right.
So that motorcycle happened, and I sold that one, bought another. I bought the 2003,
Dude,
I think.
you've owned like a lot of motorcycles and a
Used,
lot of...
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And it's still a thing. I can't really own multiple things at one time.
At one point
So
in
if I
time.
have one motorcycle, I would like to own just one and then move
Own
on.
it, ride it, experience it,
Yeah,
finish
and
it
then,
off,
move,
and then
on.
move on.
Yeah. If I have like three things, I'll like forever be confused. I'll be standing in the parking lot for half an hour thinking, which one should I ride today?
Absolutely.
So one of these days I was hanging out in Karol Bagh again, like Royal Enfield, so getting something or the other fitted, and I see these bunch of guys hanging out. They seemed like approachable enough to like talk
Right.
to, and
Right.
so we got talking, and I met this guy called Rishabh Nair,
Right.
very good friend. I unfortunately haven't been able to meet him for a long time. He's just got married,
Right.
and so Rishabh and I got talking, and I ran out of fuel because damn thing didn't have a fuel gauge, but
Yeah, yeah.
they helped me out. And then this guy was like, oh, I work for this website and I write about like motorcycles and cars. And I was like, wow, I mean, this is the friend I always wanted to be. And so he said that, I mean, you want to give it a shot? I mean, just drop by someday. And I just took it like a, light conversation that he probably wouldn't remember after going back home. But I followed up, and that's how it started. I wrote my first article as something that I had to present for the interview. And I went there, interview happened, got into copy editing and, writing
And this was
for Car Talk
Car
at that
Talk,
time.
right.
Car Talk.
All right.
So 1 year went by.
Right.
And I was kind of enjoying it. Copy editing gives you it's like a great learning tool if you start copy editing, because you're reading a lot and you know how to then form paragraphs and then
Look at punctuation. You get a keen eye for words, sentence formations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, even for me, when I started off this thing of journalism, I started off as a copywriter.
Oh.
And through the course of time, you kind of develop this sense of
Yeah.
seeing what's right, what's wrong.
I think copywriting is even more challenging because
Yeah.
you have to write smaller pieces but really meaningful
Really
ones and-
meaningful pieces. I mean, mine was more for social, so it stuck to being smaller, like a little crisp, and understanding or conveying that message in a very short formation, or like a couple of sentences.
Yeah.
But for like an article, that's
Yeah.
long, dude. Like it's like
Article
1,000
is-
words. Sometimes it goes up to like 2,000 words, 3,000,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, good learning experience at that time, but also online is a domain where I think things need to be quick.
Right.
So your articles need to be churned out quickly, and I thought that, okay, I'm not getting enough time to sort of really be imaginative about my writing. There's no real space to write a proper story that way.
Right.
So I really wanted to move on and progress on to magazines, but then again, it's such a
And through the
close-knit-
course of this, you were doing copy editing, not writing scripts.
No, copy editing. So first half of the day, copy editing. Second,
You used
this
to
was
write
for
articles
Associated
out of it,
Press
yeah.
and for the
Right.
sports page.
Right.
And then the second half would be Car Talk, so
Oh,
writing
wow.
about.
Right.
So it was nicely balanced that way.
Right.
But then that space for creative writing wasn't really there.
Yeah.
And I saw this post on Facebook. This is towards maybe a year at Car Talk. And Sirish Chandran, current editor for Evo
Yeah.
India, he had posted an article saying that Evo from Evo UK is coming to India. I was like, whoa, this is like big news, and he's the editor, and I've known him as the editor of Overdrive for so long, and I used to love what he would write, and I was like, this is a big opportunity, and
Right.
and I thought, like, hang on, like, should I even apply? Because
Yeah.
there'll be so many people from the industry who would have applied by now.
Already,
Who knows?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
people probably would have been selected.
Yeah.
Then Rishabh, in fact, I'm really thankful to him again, but he said, dude, like, why do you have to worry about that? Just, like, apply.
Yep.
I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I sent him a resume, no reply for a week. And that's it. I thought like this is not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So I then edited my resume and sent it back again.
Yeah.
That's when I got a reply back from Suresh saying that look, you want to come down to Pune? Maybe we can have a chat. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay,
Yeah.
let's do that. So I came down to Pune, and I loved the city at the time.
Yeah.
Loved the fact that I was sitting in front of Sirish, and like we had this conversation. I was on board, and yeah, next thing I know is I'm in Pune working for Evo. At the time, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
The amount I got to learn at Evo was phenomenal because he had part of the team was ex Overdrive, so I had Abhay Varma, who's
So you're like people who were working in the industry for a very long time, imparting you the knowledge about
different. So I had a whole lot of cars coming from Sirish, and at the time Anirudh Rangnekar, who's still a rally driver. He was there. Bairam Godrej was there. I had Abhay Varma for motorcycles. Bhuvan Chaudhary was working with us briefly. And Sudhir Gaikwad was our copy editor at that time. And he had a whole lot of things like as feedback for your writing. That was very encouraging. And then Gaurav Thomre, big time photographer, and I still admire his work. I think it's one of the best in the industry as far as automotive photography is concerned. So I picked up photography for a bit. And
oh really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And looking at like racing for so long on television, and then finally ending up at a racetrack to cover a domestic.
That feeling is insane, right?
Is incredible because and it is so intense and so powerful for me now that every time I'm at a racetrack and you get that smell of burnt clutches and rubber, it's
race fuel.
It's intoxicating. I mean, every time at a racetrack, it's just a nice place to be, like a really nice place to be. So this was at Curry, I remember, and Curry is so tiny, right? I mean, you can stand in the middle of the
and see the entire
field,
track.
and you've got a view of the start-finish line. You've got a view of the other side. So I was shooting. Vaishali was there at the time. Again, somebody I really look up to. I think she is the best motorsport journalist we've had. All due respects to Vinayak Pandey also. He's again been somebody I look up to. So much knowledge about like old racing, old-time racing, like Formula One, and then Vaishali again. So just being around these people, around the racers, looking at the LGB cars, and at that time I think it was the 1600, and all of that was just overwhelming for me. And I started covering motorsport. It was really interesting. Till date, I think I enjoy writing about motorsport maybe more than anything else because there's just so much to write about. In fact, a recent trip
you were writing about motorsports and clicking photographs as well?
Only for motorsport events and doing my reviews on the side. So whole lot of work. Recently, like we covered WRC. That was PowerDrifts first, my first. And again, it was just phenomenal as an experience because this is obviously not on a racetrack. It's out in the open, on public roads, roads that you would otherwise use. And looking at a car just like zoop past you at like some 200 kmph is insane.
But I think your most famous stint in the automotive industry had to be Auto Today because I think you spent the maximum duration of your career in this industry was at Auto Today.
So about a year at Evo, and I headed back to Delhi. Spent about 4 years at Auto Today, and Auto Today was the same kind of work, but I really I got introduced to television at the time. So India Today is the parent company, and at that time it was Headlines Today. Now they have an India Today channel. It's the same channel. And we had a show at that time called the Auto Today Show. Aired like a couple of times a week.
Were you part of the show in terms of just being in front of the camera?
Being in front of the camera.
You were?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But unlike magazines, being in front of a television camera or like a video is a whole different ballgame. Right?
Absolutely.
And I am camera shy. I mean, you might not believe it, but I am camera shy even now. So it was a huge challenge for me. I would like really keep my sort of PTCs and everything to a minimum. So that I don't spend too much time in front of the camera. And I think, those 4 years was a good learning phase, a good amount of time spent in the industry. And then PowerDrift happened. And that's when...
I mean, how did it start? I mean, what was that first conversation with Rohan like? And yeah, man, let's just get to it.
So, strangely enough, it wasn't in India.
Okay.
And this is the first time I was meeting Rohan. Like I've always like seen the videos, and I was like, wow, this guy like can really do some really nice stuff.
Yeah.
In terms of like visually, visual treatment to a video, and the kind of stuff that PowerDrift was producing. I was following PowerDrift, by the way, from Car Talk times, because that's when it started.
Yeah, so that was PTR.
That was PTR, Power to the Rider. And that's when I started like following them. And so it had been years till I met Rohan, and this was China.
Right.
MG Motor had still not come in.
But I think that was they wanted journalists to get a feel of what they
what the
expect.
company is. And this was last year, in fact, last year, November.
Right.
And so we ended up there, and we were at the test facility when Rohan walks up to me, and he's like, hey, so where do you work and stuff? And I told him this is where I work, and he's like, are you interested in motorcycles? So I was like, I'm interested in motorcycles and cars, and right now I'm covering motorcycles for today, but I mean, doesn't really matter as long as I'm behind the wheel or a handlebar.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, would you want to work with PowerDrift? And in my head at that time, it was like me saying yes, like I was shouting out yes.
Yeah.
But I was like, let me put some thought behind it. And so we got on with our work, and it was good fun. We had a little race there, and so didn't really get to talk much, but in the evening, over some drinks, we got talking quite a lot. And then I think that whole conversation was nice. It was around motorcycles, around cars, and around work. And then he was like, okay, I'll see you back in India, and then let's take this forward. I said, okay. And when I came back, I again thought, like, I mean, it was a very interesting conversation, but over a lot of drinks. I didn't quite think he would remember, or, but it would materialize. But it did. And it, in fact, it took about a few months, because, again, like, he was on work assignments, I was on work assignments, and then I think April last year is when I landed again in Pune. And it was a very good thing. By the way, in between, we met in Goa on the Interceptor ride.
Yeah, I think that was November as well.
Yeah, somewhere around that time,
PowerDrift,
right?
And, I mean,
what a brilliant
considering the fact that we met in November and it took you like 6 months to join PowerDrift. I mean, it takes a while. PowerDrift has got a lot of thought process, not just in videos, but also
a lot of work.
A lot of work. Yeah, so I think 6 months. Finally, it happened.
I
mean, and you are on board now. So that transition from being in the print industry to being in a digital world, how was that transition like for you?
That's a great question to come to, because I was just thinking about that, because it was for me a big step. Magazines have been pretty established because they're older. A lot of senior people are working in the industry, and so the transition from a magazine to video was quite a big jump for me. I mean, you're looking at writing,
and it's not just I mean, there are publications out there who double up as video houses or video production houses, but they still have an editorial or a magazine or a print wing that's functioning. And so PowerDrift is only video and digital, right?
Exactly. And the whole focus is on the magazine, because, it's like the baby. So the video has come in later. It's just because you want to keep up with the industry. And this was a shift where now the baby is the video. It's PowerDrift, and they're all about videos. There's no real writing involved. I mean, of course, we write our scripts, and but it's a whole different ball game, right? I mean, if I write a magazine article and present it on a video, it'll be like super boring. Super boring. So you really need to conceptualize a video, and just and the way PowerDrift does it was overwhelming for me. In fact, I
can't believe, dude, it's already been 8 months now.
8 months, a whole lot of videos.
But how has it been, dude? Like, 8 months working with PowerDrift. I mean, I know it's been hectic, because there have been times where Abhik and I have not seen each other for like 30 days straight.
I've been on 2 months also. There was this one time, because this whole podcast thing started 3 months back.
I mean, 3 months we've been trying to get Abhik on the podcast, and 3 months, 90 days it's taken us to...
We work really hard.
All right. But 3 months it took us, and man, how's work been for you at PowerDrift? And
so work has been new, quite hectic, but very, very interesting. Talking about that transition, in fact, I remember meeting Shumi at a Yamaha launch. This was the MT-15.
Right.
And
BIC.
No, this was somewhere in Bangalore,
Right.
just a launch event. No ride.
Okay.
Yeah, the ride was later in BIC,
Yeah.
right? So Shumi walks up to me and he's like, "Hey, what? I heard like you're quitting auto today, and what's up?"
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to say because I had told nobody.
Nobody, yeah.
And I was like, how did you get to
Yeah.
know this? And he's like, don't worry about it. I'll see you there. And he just kept it at that. And
Yeah.
then we sat down for the press conference.
Typical Shumi.
Typical Shumi. And then the entire press conference, I'm like thinking, what did he really mean?
Yeah.
Like, see me there. Because at that time, he was the editor of Overdrive,
yeah.
and I had no clue that he had, I think, put down his papers already. So after the launch happened, first thing I ran up to Shumi. I was like, "Hang on, what was that?" So he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to be joining you." And I was like, "Whoa!"
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that was a reassurance for me because
Yeah.
for me it was still irrespective of how big PowerDrift is, and the amount of like good work that's going on at PowerDrift. I really didn't know what to expect because a whole different domain. So Shumi being there was a big assurance for me. So.
Yeah.
Somebody like him shifting from magazines, he's been working with magazines for 20 years. I've been following his work for like forever.
Yeah.
Big fan again,
Yeah.
like all of us are.
Yeah.
And so that was again a motivational listing. Came into PowerDrift and Prahlad,
Yeah.
famous Prahlad.
Yeah.
And it was very good. In fact, I mean, this was a completely different environment. Every single person is interested in automobiles.
Yeah.
I couldn't find anybody who was not.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a good place to be in because you're surrounded by people who like what they do, who love automobiles and who love producing content like that. And then gradually that fear of working with all these talented DPs, especially somebody behind the camera, even right now, love riding with him. This is Akshay Jadhav, by the way. And a whole lot of other people and going to different assignments, doing different work. It's still settling in, you know. It's been 8 months, but it's still settling in. I still look at a video and think that, wow, like they're doing such a good job. And hang on, you are part of them.
Yep.
So you are doing a good job, but then it's still taking time to sink in.
Yeah.
But it's been brilliant.
You've got any plans for 2020?
2020, let's say I've got to get my 390s like back up again. It's not been running in the last couple of months, I think, because of a faulty fan, radiator fan. But that has got to go up, get up, and I've got to get back up running.
Right.
And a lot more track days, honestly. And I'm starting to get this temptation to own a track-only car. I don't know how that'll go.
Track-only car.
A track-only car.
Yeah.
So I do have a friend who has an old rally CDR lying in Coimbatore. Now, a rally CDR already has the cage. It has. It was a group end, so I think group ends were just exhaust and intake modifications. It has a good amount of scope, and a little bit of expense on the suspension, and then Chennai isn't too far away.
Yeah,
from
Chennai isn't too
so
far away.
It's one of my favorite racetracks. I mean, we've got the BIC, it's a brilliant track, but and we've got Kari, which is.
But I think out of the three, even my favorite racetrack has to be Chennai. Because,
you've raced enough times there.
I've raced enough times, but more than that, it's just a good track to understand how a motorcycle or a car will function.
Absolutely.
Going at full pace, and even when it's around like a technical section.
Yeah,
so it's just a good mix of both the worlds.
It is a brilliant racetrack, and I don't think this podcast will be enough for me to like express my love for the MMRT because it is such a brilliant racetrack, and I've had initial days of covering motorsport events there. Then this one year where I got really lucky with so many racing, we had the TVS thing, like obviously a couple of years apart, but I'd done it first. That was again a brilliant experience just to be on the racetrack, and then to realize that a school is so important. Just like for education, a school is important. To ride better, a riding school is important. And
Absolutely.
TWO, we all went there together. Again, it's such an eye-opener. Like you can be riding for so many years and not know these basic things which can really get like a lot of seconds out of your lap time. I mean seconds, not like just points of a second, tenths or so. it's just a big eye opener. Cars for me, again, I think if you are inclined towards motorcycles, you know that taking a motorcycle around the corner is a big deal.
Yep.
You need skills. You need a lot of sort of technical knowledge about how it goes, unless you're like gifted naturally, which is a little rare, I think, unless you're Varun Painter. But
not that. I think everything that you do on a motorcycle or in a car, and if you do it focusing towards a certain thing, it requires building up your skills and, you know, practicing them over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
And there's just a lot of time, energy, a lot of physical input that goes into perfecting those things, and it's just a time thing, man. But you know, it's going to happen over time. And
for sure.
I think in that same space, I would also like to say that change when you first did a video at PowerDrift and to now, I think there's been a drastic change on how you've been in front of the camera, and I'm sure people who are watching this right now also feel the same way in terms of how Abhik has grown as an individual. Just trying to
this is really reassuring.
trying to just make you guys understand how a car functions, or just making you understand how good a car is, or if the car is better for you or not. But super interesting story, dude. You started off with something as small as a CBZ back then, and you have a KTM 390 now, and your love for cars also keeps going on and all. I think 2020 for the both of us is going to start off with one big expo, and that's the Auto Expo.
Oh, yes.
I think for now, but we're going to close this chapter, but it was really nice talking to you. 2020 Expo is when we get to work again together.
Yes.
Not as much for me because hardly manufacture. I mean, we've got a couple of manufacturers that are going to be there.
Not many cars also. I mean, a lot of new entrants from China. We've got Great Wall Motors coming in. We've already have MG.
Yep.
We're going to see Mercedes and a lot of, I think, electric vehicles from
so
Mercedes.
I think cars is quite an extensive list, but motorcycles not as much.
Not really.
As compared to the other expos, of course not.
Absolutely. And it's a little sad and disheartening that so many manufacturers are backing out because of the economic slowdown and high costs of renting a stall at the expo. And but we're going to miss out on a lot of people. JLR, Audi,
lots of
a lot
them.
nice
I
cars,
mean, motorcycle pretty
Honda.
much everybody's out. He's not participating.
And
but
as far as cars are concerned, we're going to look at, I think Suzuki is going to be interesting. And some other
Hyundai
players as well.
I was just talking to people about cars and motorcycles at the expo. But that's a chat for another day. Thank you so much for being on the PowerDrift Podcast, Abhik Das.
Finally.
I hope you guys, it's finally happened. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this episode with Mr. Abhik Das. If you want to see someone else, let us know in the comment section below. And if you have any topic in mind that you want us to talk about, then we will gladly do that. For now, it's me saying bye-bye. My name is Varun Painter, and I will see you later.
Ciao.